Action! Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie. I know it's taken me a while to get back to all of you, especially the newest subscribers since Rhinebeck. But if you saw the last episode, well, if you didn't, I will put a link here so you can go and see it. It was a very popular one. But if you did see it, then you would know that I was wearing this sweater like, without one sleeve and without the buttons and just partially finished. It may look like it's finished to you. Let me stand up. So yeah, both the sleeves, let me back up a little. Both the sleeves are attached, front and back, knit, collar completed, buttons sewn on. But don't be fooled, all that glistens is not gold. I thought that on the way to Rhinebeck that I was going to have enough time to finish up the sweater and have it be my Rhinebeck sweater. But let me show you what is happening on the inside and you'll see why it was never going to be possible for me to have this done. I actually have a picture with all of the ends, but the nature of this pattern was that every 6 rows I had to cut the blue and restart it. So I have about 1 million ends that need to be woven in. I don't know what I was thinking that this would be finished for Rhinebeck. Of course, I could have worn it with all of this inside. No one would have known. I did want you to see that the buttons are sewn on. I also thought you might like to see my stranding. Isn't she pretty? So does anybody have any movies that they like to watch when they're weaving in ends like this? I belong to a movie club, and our film for this weekend is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp from 1943. I imagine I'll be watching that as I weave these in. I might cheat and knot some of them. It's just too many. I think I'd be working on this for years. Has anybody seen that movie? What did you think? At this juncture, I have only some of the ends woven in. So this side, they're all woven in. But this sleeve still has tons of spaghetti hanging out. Now, if you notice, they're all blue, for the most part, blue. And you may be wondering why that is. Well, let me explain. In this motif, see this row of solid white? 6 rows later, there's another row of solid white. 6 rows later, another row of solid white. I opted not to carry my floats along on that white row because I thought it would be a waste of yarn. I wasn't really thinking like an intelligent knitter, however, because if I had carried them, I wouldn't have all these strands left to weave in. Every 6 rows, I cut the blue yarn because I didn't need it to go across the white row. And then when I finished the white row, there wasn't going to be blue yarn here. I had to start a new ball of blue. So, not to beat a dead horse, but every 6 rows I have an end to be woven in. It took me an entire day to do one sleeve and down the side, and I just got sick of doing it. So the good news is I started my next project, which is associated with this. Well, actually, before I show you that, I did want to show you a close-up of these beautiful buttons, how lucky I was to find them at Rhinebeck at Dusty's Vintage Buttons. I really didn't tell you about this sweater that I designed it myself based on a motif from a vintage Norwegian sweater. And I wanted to do a simpler shoulder construction than what most vintage patterns call for, which they're usually set-in sleeves. But I really struggle with set-in sleeves, getting the fit through here to be right. So for this project, I decided, since I was creating it myself, to do a modified drop shoulder. Why modified instead of just a regular drop shoulder? Well, I imagine that you can see that the side of the sweater is here, but the sleeve, see the seam? I know I did such a good job of matching up the pattern, but the sleeve begins here. So that's the corner of this sleeve. It's here and then here. So all of this, if I had carried this straight up and attached the sleeve here, I would have all of that excess fabric. This really cuts down the amount of fabric that's in here, because I really don't like that look when there's a lot of extra fabric. So that was the first thing that I did that I really hadn't ever done before. The second thing I did was to decide to make these buttons on the shoulder. I knew that the buttons were going to be a little heavy for the fabric, and I thought it would be virtually impossible to get buttonholes in exactly the right place, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't working off an existing pattern. So I thought, instead of doing buttonholes, I would just put snaps behind the buttons and snap it. Making the shoulder was much more challenging than I would have thought. This shoulder was just typical. You know, I knit the front, I knit the back, I did a 3-needle bind off. Look how beautiful. You can't even tell, right? It's here. It is here. You might be able to see it sort of pucker in, but the pattern is so perfectly matched. It's continuous right across. I didn't know exactly how high up to start the neck, so I looked at another sweater and I tried to, get it to be here, and then I knit the turtleneck up from there. And I gave myself a lot of extra stitches so that the front and the back of the turtleneck would overlap, and I would have plenty of extra fabric in there to give it good support. This part, I made like two, I don't know what you would call it. This one, almost like a gusset, and then a flap to wrap over the gusset. So ideally, when this is closed, you may see a little bit of white stripe, which is fine because the turtleneck is blue and white stripe. So I didn't find that objectionable. I wasn't shooting for this to be in pattern of this. I didn't want to go crazy there. So I don't have it blocked yet, so I'm not going to try it on for you today, but in some future episode, be on the lookout. I will have this on, as well as the follow-on project, which is a matching hat. The yarn is cashmere, by the way. It's 100% cashmere from Color Mart. I think it's 3/28 NM. If that's wrong, I'll put the correct information on the screen. 2 strands of it, because a single strand was way too thin. So I've been knitting 2 strands of everything. I obviously did the same motif, but I had seen a hat similar to this that had this zigzag pattern, and I wanted to incorporate that because I liked the way the hat looked. And I don't know how that hat was made, but it looked to me like there was a double layer of ribbing. And I'm really holding this in the direction that I'm knitting it, but it's going to be this way. All of this ribbing is going to be up inside of here, like so. And here's my needle, my cable. This will keep growing until I decrease, and it'll come to a point, and then there'll be a big fluffy pom-pom. I would like to know if you think the pom-pom should be blue or white. I'm inclined to go with blue, but would love your thoughts on that. I'm certainly using a lot more of the blue yarn. I started with equal amounts of blue and white. But I figure the white is so versatile I can use it in other projects if I have a lot left over. Whereas the blue, it's going to be exclusively this. And my goal is, after I'm finished with the hat and the sweater, that I might want to make gloves or mittens, probably gloves, in the Norwegian style with my initials knitted in. So, you know, there's a lot more coming down the pike. If you just come back and watch episode after episode, you'll get to see my progress. I really should report that most of the time when I knit, I would say I'm a product knitter. I do the process because it's the means to an end. But very often there are frustrations and things get put aside. In this particular case, this sweater, I would say of everything I've ever knit, it was the most enjoyable knit. Something about this motif was very potato chippy. You had to pay attention every step of the way because this row, as I've explained before, was like shifted in the next row. So every time I got to this solid white row, I would have to figure out, well, I just did a diamond here, so now I'm going to have a straight line going up to this little square. I know they look round, but they're really supposed to be squares. And I had to keep looking out for everything. Plus, a lot of these stitches are shifted over one unit. But in some areas, it's 3 rows where the stitches are stacked one on top of the other. So you have to pay attention. And if you do pay attention, you'll see any error right away. You can look at this. There's not a mistake in it. There's not one place where I missed, like, you know, I put the square in the wrong place, or I didn't decrease the white stitches at the same rate. No. So it really kept my focus, it really kept my attention, it really kept me motivated to complete. And each time I came back to it, it was like exciting all over again. I really haven't ever felt that feeling. It was a beautiful thing. And for you, as a knitter, that's what I wish. Okay, so I think I've said enough about that. By the way, I named it Norwegian Woods since it's based on a Norwegian motif. And this I'll be calling very cleverly Norwegian Wood Hat. So that's my FO, sort of, and one whip. And now let's talk about acquisitions. So you'll know that at Rhinebeck I purchased 0 yarn. I was looking for a couple specific things for future projects, and if you've been with me before, you'll know I don't keep stash. I really try very hard to be disciplined about not buying yarn that I'm not going to use in the very near future. So the only things that I have stockpiled are leftovers, like I might have a small ball of this and this from this project. And most every project I don't use up the yarn till the last inch. So I do have some leftovers stashed. But since I finished the sailor sweater recently, and I virtually have finished Norwegian wood, I decided, and plus it was my birthday, slipped in towards the end of October, I thought I could really allow myself to buy yarn for a future project, an upcoming project. So with that, let me first, before I go to acquisitions, let me first talk about the next knit along that I plan on conducting. In the last knit along, the sailor sweater, the one where I did the sequins on the back collar, a group of us who knit it together were talking about what we might like to knit together in the future, and people in the group were proposing different things. I think I showed about 5 or 6 different ideas in a prior video, but I wasn't personally enthralled with any of them, so I kept on hunting, and alas, I came up with something. This sweater reminds me of a sock monkey. If you don't know what a sock monkey is, I'll try and put a few pictures of sock monkeys that people have made. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cute to use some kind of colors that would make it look like a sock monkey? Usually I think they're done in sort of like a brown and ivory color. I started looking online. Well, actually, I looked at Rhinebeck and I didn't see anything like that. Then I started looking online, and every time I'm trying to find something, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I don't know if you have that situation ever, but I always nail down, pretty precisely what it is that I want, and then I go on a hunt for it, and so often I come back empty-handed. So there's a beautiful local yarn shop. It's not super local to me. I mean, in New York City, we have many lovely yarn shops, none right in my neighborhood, but every 6 months, I have to visit my dermatologist. If you see my face shining, it's because he did a little biopsy on something there, and I have some ointment on it. But he's only a few blocks away from Annie and Company. And I try very hard. I try really hard not to go in there because the temptation is so great. They have such beautiful things, and the people are really lovely. This was my second experience. I'll tell you about the first experience as well. Second experience where someone who worked there bent over backwards to try and help me. Not to make the sale, but to genuinely help me. The first experience was, I don't remember her name, an Asian woman. I went in and I said, I did not buy this yarn in this shop. I bought it at Rhinebeck, but I'm having a lot of trouble with it. It was, what do you call it? Like a chenille yarn, kind of like fingering weight. And it kept worming out. It kept making these little loops. I tried to cast on 17 times, doing 17 different patterns, a few different types of casts on. And it just kept happening, and it was so frustrating to me because the color is exquisite. It's like this violet color, really beautiful. And the woman was so helpful to me. She said, did you try doing a knitted cast on instead of a long tail cast on? And I said, no, I did not. So on the bus ride home, I tried that, and that didn't warm out, which was a good thing, but then everything else I did after that warmed out. I mean, she told me try different size needles, which, I had been doing. Small needles, large needles, nothing worked. But she was so kind to help me with a yarn that wasn't purchased in their shop. I thought that was unusual. You know, it's New York, don't forget. But when I went in there this past Monday, it was Erica who helped me. I said, Erica, I'm looking for yarn like you would use for a sock monkey. And she said, well, we don't really have anything like that. And I was like, I was like on a mission to buy yarn. So I said to her, well, I'm here in the shop. I may as well look around. And I did find a couple of things that were like barber pole, where the two colors of yarn are twisted. But neither of them were exactly what I was looking for. And then she went online and she started looking at websites that might have this type of yarn that I was looking for. And yes, she found acrylic, which I didn't want. And yes, she found something that was aran weight, which I didn't want. Well, anyway, let me put a picture here of the pattern that I've decided to go with for the next knit along. And in the show notes below, I will have a link if you're interested in signing up to do this knit along, which will start in January 2025. You'll get more information about, how it's going to work if you follow that link. So even though it's a ways off, I thought, I'm kind of desperate to start. So I might start before the knit along just so that I can steer the rest of the people and have already had some of the experience of whatever pitfalls there are, so I can be able to say, like, my experience was I did it like this and this worked out for me, and I could show it. So I'm not going to start right away, although I might be naughty and I might. I do have a couple of other whips that I would like to get back to. My, what is it called? You're probably tired of hearing this because it's been years, for the Rink or the Lynx. The red, peach, and sort of like a brown color, not exactly argyle, but it's a 3-color geometric pattern. It's exquisite. I knit the whole thing and then I couldn't put it on. It just had absolutely no give because it was all stranded. I'm in the process of re-knitting it in Intarsia, so it has a lot more give. I do need to get back to that sweater because I would like to have that sweater. It's just, you know how it is. When you put something aside for a while, it's hard to pick it up and get back into it. But I know, I should, I must. So that's one. And then there's also the black Tyrolean sweater cardigan that'll have buttons down the front. And it has large flowers in bright colors. And I'm doing my own design on the back. That's, I would say, about 75% done. So yeah, I know I should get back to that. But I don't have to tell you how much more exciting it is to buy new yarn and cast on. So yeah, I'm falling into that trap. Just like the rest of you. Finally, Erica and I came to the decision that I might be able to get the look I wanted by combining a fingering weight black with a fingering weight white. These are the Cascade Heritage yarn. It's superwash, which I wasn't happy about. But it is merino, so, it's very squishy and soft as anything. I compare it to the cashmere, and it almost feels like it's softer than the cashmere. This will soften when it's washed. I washed my swatch, so I know it's a little bit softer, but merino, mwah. I bought just one skein of each. I thought I might try and twist it myself, and I did, but it kept like twisting back on itself. It was not a happy experience. So all I did was just hold the two colors together, and here's my swatch. And I think, it's pretty close to what I was looking for. It's not exactly, but that's going to be the main part of the sweater. And then I'll hold two strands of the white together to do the white bands. And then, of course, I had to buy the red because I'm going to do the collar red and maybe some other little bits. So my acquisitions in the yarn category this week are this. Love it. These next acquisitions have nothing to do with knitting, but humor me. You may know that I have a substantial collection of vintage hats. This is my most recent addition. It's a sombrero andaluz from Torremolinos, Spain. And that's how that's going to be worn. Pretty cool, right? My next acquisition is a seasonal product from Trader Joe's, which is as close to a grocery store as I have in my neighborhood. There's no big box supermarket here. My husband actually picked this up because he fell in love with the packaging, which often their packaging is irresistibly gorgeous. So, pumpkin spice coffee from Trader Joe's. Haven't opened it yet. I wanted to show it to you first. Maybe next time I'll remember to tell you how we enjoyed the taste of it. I'm not really one for flavored coffees, but he is, so I'll have to go along with it. My next acquisition is due to my late mother-in-law throwing away a few pieces of my cutlery. I think other family members over the years may have accidentally discarded a piece here and there, but I've had this silverware since 1976 when I moved into this apartment. And in the box there was service for 8. I only keep service for 4 out. It's called the Solar System, and this particular pattern was called Aries. So that's the fork, the salad fork. I was missing 3 of those. And this is the soup spoon. I was only missing 1 of these. Everything else I have. So in the United States, there's a company called Replacements. They have most silverware patterns like Reed and Barton or, I don't know, Gorham, whoever else makes sterling service, or silver plated, fine service. But they have stainless steel things too. So over the years, I've looked for my pattern. They never had it. I think the way they acquire things is through estate sales and whatever. And this probably wasn't a very popular pattern that thousands of people were buying. So there's probably not a lot of it out there. And it's very particular, so possibly everybody who has it loves it and doesn't want to let it go. Anyway, Replacements buy stuff like really inexpensively, and then they sell it for a lot. Well, okay, I just needed a few pieces. I was willing to pay quite a bit, but they didn't have it. So at some point it was listed there, like they just showed pictures and they said, we don't have any in stock, but we can notify you if we ever do. So I put my name on the wait list, and eventually I was so thrilled one day when it came up, like, yes, we have it. So I ordered the 4 pieces that I needed, and now my service is complete again. I can't tell you how happy I am. I mean, even though they were pricey, I feel whole. So that's my last acquisition. A number of episodes ago, I proposed a contest for people to guess how much blue yarn and how much white yarn I would have left over after I finished the Norwegian wood sweater. So those numbers are in. I made a little video showing me weighing everything. So I'll have the correct numbers on the screen, and then I just wanted to tell you who the people were who made their guesses. Kara S. said she thought that I would finish the sweater in time for Rhinebeck, which we now know I did not. She thinks the blue and white, she thought one blue and one white would be finished. And for the other, she thought 25 grams of blue and 35 grams of white. Then Jay Henderson, who's a very regular viewer of this podcast, gave her wild guess 170 grams of each color. Robin Capuano is another regular longtime viewer. She also thought that I would finish, and she guessed 15 grams of blue and 18 grams of white left over. So after I show the video, I will put on the screen who the winner is, and please reach out to me in the comments with your information, and a ball of Rowan Sofiak DK will be coming your way. So as you will recall, an empty cone weighed 31.57 grams, and I'm about to weigh each of the 4 cones. So this is the cone that is, this is the cone that has the double strands. This was from the second batch that I ordered. $109.53, and I'll back out the weight of the empty cone. This one, did it go back to 0? Yeah, okay. This one is 118.6. That's the first set, that's the first set of cones that I ordered with a single strand. This is the double strand. $118.55. And lastly, the single strand has 71.17 left. The last thing I want to share with you today is a link in the show notes to a video on YouTube about styling 1950s sweaters. It's a British video that another one of my viewers sent me the link to. Thank you, Colette. So that'll be there for you to go click on and enjoy. I really want to express my appreciation to all of you who became subscribers after watching my Rhinebeck recap. There were so many of you that it really warmed my heart. My channel's very niche. You know, the whole idea of knitting from vintage patterns, it has appeal, but it's, you know, it's kind of a very specialized group. So the fact that people were happy to subscribe because of what they saw from my Rhinebeck episode really touched me. So I hope you continue to watch. I hope you continue to enjoy. I'd love to meet you in the knit-along in January, because we'll be Zooming and we'll get to meet one another. A couple days ago, I manned an election poll. You know, it was the presidential election in the United States. It was quite an experience for me. I'd never done it before. Both my husband and I signed up to do this, and we went for a 4-hour training. He was assigned to our polling place, which is around the corner from where we live. Somehow I got assigned to like a central location as a standby. I sat there knitting from 5 o'clock, well, not 5 o'clock, they let us in at 5 a.m., but we didn't really get into our seats until about 6 a.m., but from 6 a.m. till about 1:30, I sat and I knit, mostly on that hat. I knit about like that much. I was so excited, because those are size 2 needles, you know, it's not a quick knit. But at 1:30, they said, okay, we have a location that needs you. So 3 people and I were all sent to a taxi, which was prepaid for us, and it took us right to the location. And it turned out that it was only about 10 blocks from where I live. So I was pretty happy about that. My comments, you know, I don't want to get political. I know that that's very sensitive. But in terms of how the election was run, I was very, very impressed. Now that I've been through a whole day of it, I could see, based on my background in engineering, I could see many aspects of the process that could be improved. But in terms of security and privacy, fairness of our procedure, I thought it was ironclad. They have considered every different possibility. If you've moved, if you've changed states, if you have some kind of a court order, if you want to vote using an affidavit rather than the ballot. I mean, there's all these like special categories that apply to different types of people. We didn't have all of those situations at the table that I was working, but the equipment that they have is phenomenal, including a privacy booth. What did they call it? Oh, now I forget. Something like BMD. I might have to look that up and put it on the screen, but they have a special piece of equipment for people who cannot vote in the conventional way. They can't pick up a pen and bubble in the oval on the ballot. Maybe they have to put an instrument in their mouth and guide it. If they don't have hands, they can't hold a pen. Or if they're blind and they can't see the ballot, there's Braille for them. There's so many pieces of apparatus for individuals who have unique special needs. And I thought that's great, because no one will be denied the right to vote. It's amazing to me. And every location has one of those special booths. Our location, I think, only had about 1,000 people come through the doors to vote. Many people voted early this election. But even for those 1,000 people, this piece of machinery was there. So for me, it's never been a question of fairness, but now I really saw behind the scenes how some of this works, and I was duly impressed. Yeah, that's a big sigh. Well, okay. I hope that everybody's got a wonderful project that they're currently knitting on, and I wish I could see what all of you are doing. Perhaps someday you'll comment and say what you're knitting. Maybe you're a crocheter. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you next time. Ciao for now.